Lauren and I had always been the kind of couple that made everyone else envious. People would comment all the time about how perfect we were together, how we always seemed to have it all figured out. I thought so too. Our relationship felt rock solid for years. We had this rhythm, this easy understanding, where we finished each other's sentences, shared everything, and had big dreams about the future. We met in college, both fresh-faced, ambitious, and somehow already thinking we were grown-ups. We'd spent hours talking about our futures, building up these plans that seemed like they would fall into place without much effort. We talked about buying a house, maybe 2 dogs, and definitely kids. We both had the same dreams, the same goals, and I thought that was enough. I thought it was all going to be perfect. It wasn't until a few months ago that I noticed the shift. And honestly, I didn't want to admit it. At first, it was nothing big. Just small changes. Subtle enough that I could write it off as my imagination or stress from work, or the pressures of everyday life. But over time, those small things added up, and I couldn't ignore them anymore. Lauren started getting home later, more often than usual. Sometimes she'd say she was meeting a friend, or that work had run long. But there were days where I would hear her footsteps just as I was about to fall asleep. I'd pretend I didn't notice, tell myself it was normal, that we all had busy times in our lives. She was a professional. She had goals too. I trusted her. I loved her. And that's what kept me from digging deeper. Then it started happening more frequently. She would leave her phone out in the living room while she was getting ready for bed, buzzing with messages, but never picking it up. She started placing it face down on the table whenever we ate dinner, a habit she'd never had before. I didn't think much of it at first. I wasn't the type of guy to snoop. She had always been transparent with me. But as the weeks passed, something about her behavior just started to gnaw at me. It was the way she'd scroll through her phone quickly, then hide the screen when I entered the room. It wasn't like her. She'd always been the one who didn't mind sharing, the one who'd let me glance at her screen if I asked. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that I was overreacting. But it didn't feel like that. Something had changed. I could feel it in the air between us, in the silence that had started creeping into our conversations. And the thing was, every time I brought it up, she'd get defensive. Not in an obvious way, but enough to make me question myself. "Why are you asking so much about my phone?" she'd say. "It's just work. Relax, you're being ridiculous." But it didn't feel ridiculous. I wasn't stupid. I knew something was wrong. And no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, I couldn't. I tried to shake it off. I really did. I wasn't the jealous type. I trusted her. But the more I tried to push the doubts away, the stronger they grew. Maybe it was my insecurities, I told myself. Maybe I was just overthinking it. But in my gut, I knew this wasn't just a phase. This wasn't just some random, fleeting moment of doubt. It was late one night after she'd gone out again. This time without giving me any details about where she was going or who she was meeting, that I finally cracked. She'd told me she was meeting up with her friend Sarah, but something about it didn't sit right with me. She wasn't acting the same. There was this restlessness in her movements, an edge to her words that hadn't been there before. I could tell she wasn't happy, but what I didn't know was that I was about to uncover something that would change everything. I grabbed her phone from the counter when she was in the shower, just out of habit, just to see if maybe there was something in the messages that would explain her mood. Maybe it was a work problem, maybe something else. I didn't expect to find what I did. The first thing I saw was a text from an unknown number, something that made my heart race. "I'm looking forward to tonight. Same place. Can't wait to see you again." I stared at it for a long time, not really processing what I was reading. I blinked, my head spinning, and read it again. It was so casual, so normal, like this was something routine. I felt like the world tilted beneath me. I had no idea who this person was. I had no idea what was going on. But I knew I couldn't keep pretending. My suspicions were real. And what hurt the most wasn't just the text. It was the fact that she was doing this behind my back, and I had no idea. I put the phone down quickly, feeling like I might throw up. I knew I had to confront her, but I didn't know how. What was I supposed to say? How could I accuse her of something I wasn't sure about? It was one text, after all. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just one text. The next few hours were a blur. I kept replaying it in my mind. What was she doing? Who was she meeting? And why hadn't she told me about it? I had to know. I couldn't keep pretending I didn't feel this gut-wrenching feeling in my chest. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The moment I found the message, something inside me snapped. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I told myself I wouldn't jump to conclusions, that maybe it was nothing. But I knew better. My mind kept spiraling, each thought more obsessive than the last. Who was she talking to? Why hadn't she told me about this person? Was this just a casual flirtation? Or was it something deeper? I felt the weight of the unknown pressing on me, suffocating me, until I couldn't breathe. I tried to wait for her to come home, but I couldn't. My mind was racing. My heart was pounding. And I had to know more. I didn't want to confront her without being certain, but I had no other choice. I had to find out what was really going on. I decided to follow her. It was late when she finally got ready to leave. She didn't tell me where she was going this time, just that she was meeting a friend for a drink. There was no explanation, no mention of who. Something about the way she said it made my chest tighten. It wasn't just a casual night out, it felt rehearsed. And when I asked her who she was meeting, she looked at me for just a second too long before saying, "It's just Sarah. You don't have to worry about it." I could see through the lie, but I didn't push it. I let her go. I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing, but I had to know. I needed to know who she was with. I grabbed my keys and followed her out of the house, waiting a few minutes before starting my car. She drove without any hesitation, as if she had done it 100 times. It wasn't far, just a few blocks down the street, but my heart felt like it was in my throat as I followed her through the winding streets. The familiar streets we both had walked down so many times now felt like a maze, each turn leading me further into a world I wasn't sure I belonged in. Finally, she pulled into a small parking lot behind a bar. The kind of place that didn't look like much, dimly lit, quiet, the sort of spot where no one would recognize you. I parked a few spaces away, making sure to stay out of sight. My heart pounded in my ears as I watched her step out of the car, straightening her jacket before walking into the bar. I didn't want to follow her inside. Couldn't. Felt like an invasion of privacy. But I had no choice. I had to know. Slowly, I got out of my car and walked toward the bar, staying in the shadows. The moment I pushed open the door, I could feel it, the tension in the air, like something was about to crack. I glanced around the dimly lit room, scanning the tables and booths, trying to find her. And then I saw them. There she was, sitting at the bar. But she wasn't alone. She was with a man, a stranger to me. They were laughing, leaning in close to each other, their bodies almost touching. She was looking at him with that familiar spark in her eyes, the same way she used to look at me when we first met. I stood there, frozen in place, watching as they whispered to each other, exchanging jokes, sharing moments that should have been mine. And then, as if it wasn't enough, he reached out and touched her hand. My stomach twisted. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I wanted to run, to storm over to them and confront them right then and there, but I didn't. I stayed hidden, my feet planted to the floor, unable to move, unable to do anything but watch the woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, with another man. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a one-time thing. I could see the chemistry between them, the way she responded to him, the way they shared this secret world that didn't include me. This wasn't just a night out with a friend. This was something else, something I couldn't deny anymore. I stayed in the corner, watching them for what felt like hours, barely able to keep myself together. They didn't notice me, didn't even glance in my direction. They were too wrapped up in each other. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they kissed. Right there, in public.
Nos cham.
My whole body went numb. I felt like I was drowning. Couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was stand there, watching as my entire world fell apart in front of me. I don't remember how long I stood there. The world felt blurry, like everything was moving in slow motion. My chest was tight, my hands shaking as I turned and walked out of the bar. I barely made it to my car before I had to sit down, my head spinning with disbelief. I wanted to scream, to shout, to confront her. But I couldn't. I just sat there in silence, trying to catch my breath. When I finally made it home, Lauren wasn't back yet. I didn't know what to do. I had so many questions swirling around in my head. I wanted answers, but I didn't even know how to ask them. How could I ask her what was going on when I had already seen everything? I sat on the couch for what felt like an eternity. The silence was deafening. When she finally came home, I didn't say anything. I just watched her walk in, looking exactly like she always did. Unaware, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing. She smiled at me as she walked in, asking if I had dinner. I couldn't respond. The words stuck in my throat. "You look tired," she said, slipping out of her jacket. She sounded so normal that it made my blood boil. How could she sit there, acting like everything was fine? Like she hadn't just betrayed me in the worst way possible? "Where were you?" I finally managed to ask, my voice low, barely a whisper. She froze for a second, but quickly recovered. "Just with Sarah." "I told you already." I stared at her, trying to process everything. It felt like there was 100-pound weight on my chest. But I couldn't look away from her. I had to know. I couldn't keep pretending. "I saw you," I said, my voice shaking with anger, hurt, and betrayal. "I saw you with him, at the bar, kissing him." Her face went pale. She stammered, her eyes wide, trying to find words, but nothing came out. She looked like a deer caught in headlights. You saw?" she whispered. I could hear the panic in her voice, the guilt in her eyes. But there was no denying it now. She couldn't hide from the truth. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but the words felt like they were burning inside of me. "I saw everything," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "And now I know." Her face went from pale to flushed with guilt in an instant. She stood there, rooted to the spot, her eyes wide, her mouth trembling. I could see her trying to form an explanation, but nothing came out. It was like her words were stuck, lodged somewhere deep inside her that she wasn't willing to admit. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up and took a step toward her, the anger building in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm, to hold on to some semblance of control. "You don't get to lie to me anymore," I said, my voice quieter now, but no less intense. "I saw you with him. How long has this been going on, Lauren? How long have you been lying to me? How many times?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her eyes flickered to the floor, then back up to mine, but she couldn't look me in the eye for long. It was like she was ashamed of everything, like she couldn't face me anymore. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did," she stammered, her voice shaky. "I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt you." I took a deep breath, the pain squeezing my chest. "Then why did you do this to me? Why did you let me think we were fine when all along you were with him?" She opened her mouth again, but nothing made sense anymore. There were no excuses that could explain this. There was no justification that would make her betrayal easier to swallow. "I don't want to hear it," I snapped. "You've been sneaking around behind my back, meeting him in secret, lying to me every day, and now you want me to feel sorry for you? No, you don't get to do that. You don't get to make me the fool anymore." I could see the tears welling up in her eyes now, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. Maybe I was angry, no, I was furious. But more than anything, I was heartbroken. She wasn't just my wife anymore. She was someone I didn't even recognize. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you like this. I didn't know what to do. I trusted you," I said, the words like a slap to my own face. "I trusted you with everything, and you just threw that away for him, for someone else. What does that say about me, Lauren? Was I not enough? Was I not enough for you?" Her face crumpled at the accusation, and the tears fell freely now. She reached out, like she was going to touch me, but I pulled away before she could. I couldn't handle her touch. Not right now. Not after everything. "You weren't enough," she said softly, and it felt like a gut punch. "You were perfect. You were everything. But I didn't know what I was missing. I was so confused. I didn't know what to do. And then he came into my life and everything felt easy, like it made sense again. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean for any of this." The words felt hollow. The tears she shed didn't seem real. How could they? How could they be, after everything she had done? All I could think about was the way she had kissed him, the way they had looked at each other like no one else in the world mattered. "Don't apologize," I said, trying to steady myself, to keep my composure. But it wasn't working. I was unraveling, and I couldn't stop it. "Don't apologize for this. Don't make me the bad guy. You've made your choice, Lauren. You've shown me who you really are. And I can't just ignore that anymore." She tried to reach out again, her hand trembling, but I took a step back. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "Don't leave. Don't just throw everything away. We can fix this. We can go to therapy, we can—" "No," I cut her off, the word coming out sharp. "You don't get to fix this. This is done. I'm done." The finality in my voice seemed to hit her like a wave. She stopped, frozen in place, as if she couldn't process what I was saying. But I meant it. I couldn't keep fighting for something that wasn't even there anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that we were the same. "I want you to leave," I said quietly, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "I need space. I need you to leave. I can't look at you right now." She left quietly, no fight, no more excuses. She packed a bag and walked out the door without another word. I didn't watch her go. Couldn't. It felt like I was watching a part of myself walk away, like she was taking the last shred of my heart with her. But I knew it was the only thing left to do. The next few days were a blur. The house felt empty, colder somehow. Every corner I turned, I half expected her to be there, but she wasn't. The silence was deafening. I spent days lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep, unable to think straight. My brain was consumed with images of them together, the way they laughed, the way they touched each other, the way she had looked at him. I couldn't get it out of my head. I didn't talk to anyone about it. I didn't want to. Friends and family would ask, and I'd say everything was fine. That's what I wanted to believe. But nothing was fine. Nothing would ever be fine again. I still remember that night, sitting alone in the dark, holding the engagement ring I had once planned to give her. It felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my hand. That ring had been for a future I no longer believed in. I hadn't realized it then, but I had already let go of her. Maybe not entirely, but enough to know that I couldn't ever trust her again. In the days that followed, I thought about what came next. The betrayal was too much to ignore. The lies, the deception. How could I ever trust her again? How could I ever go back to pretending that everything was okay? The hardest part wasn't even her leaving. It was the realization that I had given my everything to someone who had discarded it so easily. And as much as I hated it, I knew deep down that there was no going back. She left quietly, no fight, no more excuses. She packed a bag and walked out the door without another word. I didn't watch her go. Couldn't. It felt like I was watching a part of myself walk away, like she was taking the last shred of my heart with her. But I knew it was the only thing left to do. The next few days were a blur. The house felt empty, colder somehow. Every corner I turned, I half expected her to be there, but she wasn't. The silence was deafening. I spent days lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep, unable to think straight. My brain was consumed with images of them together, the way they laughed, the way they touched each other, the way she had looked at him. I couldn't get it out of my head. I didn't talk to anyone about it. I didn't want to. Friends and family would ask, and I'd say everything was fine. That's what I wanted to believe. But nothing was fine. Nothing would ever be fine again. I still remember that night, sitting alone in the dark, holding the engagement ring I had once planned to give her. It felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my hand. That ring had been for a future I no longer believed in. I hadn't realized it then, but I had already let go of her. Maybe not entirely, but enough to know that I couldn't ever trust her again. In the days that followed, I thought about what came next. The betrayal was too much to ignore. The lies, the deception. How could I ever trust her again? How could I ever go back to pretending that everything was okay? The hardest part wasn't even her leaving. It was the realization that I had given my everything to someone who had discarded it so easily. And as much as I hated it, I knew deep down that there was no going back. The days after she left blurred together. The quiet of the house was unbearable. I didn't realize how much noise she had made in my life, how much of a presence she had been until it was gone. Every corner of the house felt like an echo of what we used to have, a reminder of everything that was lost. The bed seemed bigger somehow, emptier without her next to me. Even the simple things, her perfume on the pillow, the sound of her keys when she came home, the little things I had taken for granted. All of it was gone, and I was left with nothing but this gnawing emptiness that seemed to grow by the day. At first, I couldn't bring myself to do anything. I lay in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moments over and over in my head. The text, the bar, her with him. How had I missed it? How had I been so blind? I hated myself for trusting her so completely, for believing that we were invincible. But it didn't take long before I started to feel the anger creep in. It wasn't just the betrayal. It wasn't just that she had slept with another man. No, it was the lies. The way she had been able to look me in the eye every single day and pretend nothing was wrong. The way she had made me feel like I was crazy when I started to question things, like I was the one losing my mind. I hated her for that. I hated her for making me feel like I wasn't enough. I hated her for taking away the future I had imagined. And above all, I hated myself for not seeing it sooner. But the anger wasn't just directed at her. I was angry at myself too. Angry for allowing myself to fall so hard, for giving her everything I had. And when I found out the truth, it felt like I had been torn apart. She hadn't just cheated on me. She had betrayed me in the deepest way possible. She had taken my love, my trust, and destroyed it without a second thought. And I wasn't sure how I was supposed to live with that. I spent the next few days avoiding my phone. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want the pity. I didn't want anyone to tell me how sorry they were for me. I didn't need that. I needed answers, but I wasn't sure I would ever get them. But then, out of nowhere, I got a call from her. It had been almost a week since she left, and I hadn't heard from her once. I wasn't sure what I expected when I picked up the phone, but it wasn't what I heard. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft and tentative. There was a pause, and I could hear the shakiness in her breath. "I've been thinking about you. I don't want you to hate me. I don't want you to think that I never loved you." The words hit me like a slap to the face. She was asking me if I was okay, after everything she'd done, after everything that had happened. "I'm not going to hate you, Lauren," I said, my voice colder than I meant it to be. "You've done enough to hurt me. I don't need to feel sorry for you." "I'm not asking you to," she replied, the desperation in her voice evident. I wanted to apologize. I never meant for it to get this far. I never wanted to hurt you, but I didn't want to hear it." She had apologized already. She had apologized with her actions, with the lies and the betrayal, and that was enough. Her words meant nothing to me now. The hurt, the anger, it was too much to bear. I had loved her with everything I had, and now she was asking for forgiveness? "I don't know how to feel about you anymore," I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again. What you did, it's unforgivable." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, but there was nothing else. "I understand," she whispered. "I really do. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I hope you find happiness again. I never wanted to cause you pain." I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say.